Welcome everyone, my name is Kanika. In today's video, we are going to discuss crying. We're going to talk about the stigma behind crying, toxic masculinity, and how to comfort a person who is crying. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get on with the video.
Hello, everybody. We are from Cittalayam, and today we'll be talking about crying and its importance and its relevance and everything about that. So today we have Ilakkiya and Vyaas. Can you guys introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Ilakkiya. I'm a third-year student studying genetics, and I look forward to talking about crying today.
Vyaas?
Hey everyone, my name is Vyaas. I'm working at a medical device company here in Chennai, and I have a background in biomedical engineering.
Thank you so much. And I'm Akshay, and I will be sort of like the moderator in this discussion. So let's go into it. So first, everybody knows what crying is, but crying, good or bad? What are your thoughts?
That's a false dichotomy, and I think crying is just what it is. It is expressing emotions. I mean, I saw a video recently, like there's 3 different types of tears. You cry for different reasons. I don't ever think it's actually a bad thing. I think crying is good.
Yes.
Yeah, crying is good, and I mean it's a question. It's like an emotion like anything else. Like the question like, is happiness good or bad? That's not something you hear often in philosophical debates or debates on ethics or morality. So I see it in the same way when I hear a question like, is crying good or bad? I mean, it's an emotion like any other, and it just is. So yeah, it's good to answer the question though. But yeah, my take.
I mean, I asked this question because I wanted to make sure we're all on the same side. We are going to talk about why crying is a good thing for the whole of the whole discussion. So if you guys had said bad, there would have been a pretty bad start to the conversation. So it's good you guys both said it's good. Okay, the second thing is there is a lot of stigma with crying. A lot of people like try to suppress their crying, like they try to act like they don't cry, and even if they do cry like a bit, they try to stop it right away. So, and that usually happens more as an adult. Where as a child, you're allowed to cry. So, why does crying as an adult have a lot of stigma?
I mean, I think we can. I don't know about. I think we've got to be more. The question's got to be more specific in terms of gender and the place you're from. So there might be certain regions within the world where it's perfectly acceptable for both men and women to cry. But in India, I've been brought up in such a way that crying is bad. Unless a significant person in your life has passed away or you've lost a loved one. So those are those are almost always the only times when crying is allowed for grown men. So that's sort of the whole situation or scenario around crying in the household, in my household, and in in the environments I've been in. So that may be different for someone living in Africa or Europe or America. It really differs from place to place. And even though I've studied in America, I'm not really sure about how crying is viewed in American families. So that's something I'm willing to learn from the two of you. But that's how I see this topic.
I feel like we often cry because like something bad is going on, and crying is actually like a signal to other people that something bad is happening to us for whatever reason, or something good is happening to us too. But usually more tears are seen when something's very upsetting. And if you cry, you're letting people know that you're like hurt, you're vulnerable at that time. And I think oftentimes we're taught to be so independent that crying is seen as a way of like getting help. And so you don't want to cry, so you don't want anyone else to know that you're suffering or anyone to try and help you in a way. I think it's more of like the attitude of independency. You don't want to get help from anyone, so you don't want them to know you're going through something tough. I think that plays a role into why you don't cry as much as adults. And I guess people try to suppress it because it's always seen as being a weak thing to cry. You know, you didn't do well in an exam, you cry. You didn't do well in a sports match, you cry. And uh, or like you're just very stressed out and you cry. And these are all places where sometimes crying is seen as like you're unable to tolerate your loss, you're not like mature enough, things like that. So I mean, the phrase "cry baby" exists because it's like you're seen as a baby when you cry, right? You're seen as being younger, and people don't want that.
That is a very good answer, and I do think that since parents are want to create good image, to their kids, and I don't want to say all adults are like parents, but most of them, at least try to be. So if that, since that is the case, uh, they want to set a good example, and because of the cultural stigma that's there with crying, where crying is seen as a weakness, which was pointed out by Ilakkiya, uh, because of that, I think adults try a bit extra to not cry. And of course, getting called as crybaby and other things obviously doesn't help either. Okay, let's go to the next question. Is this something that's like presented with Vyas's answer? So, how is toxic masculinity and toxic femininity related to crime?
Right, Akshay, would you mind defining that just a bit? A couple of one-liners, maybe,
Toxic
just so that
masculinity.
everyone's on the same page. Yeah.
Okay, toxic masculinity is something like where you don't cry because you're a man, dude, man up. Those sort of things are like toxic masculinity.
So I pulled up Psychology Today's website on toxic femininity, and I just want to further clarify because I actually didn't understand the phrase or know it well. So it's basically when someone works to the benefit of others at the detriment to themselves. So like Akshay kind of mentioned towards the end, like typically it's considered feminine traits of being very compassionate or understanding, empathetic, listening. Uh, if someone does that to an extreme where they're constantly doing that and they're always trying to help others but never helping themselves, that's what Psychology Today defines toxic femininity as. So it's like silent acceptance of like uh, other people being dominant or excessive. It's like compared to a toxic masculinity thing of like whatever. It's like this is the receiving end, kind of just like yeah.
Okay, so the question is, how is toxic masculinity and toxic femininity related to crime? And you guys can say it's not related at all, or you guys can say it is related because of these reasons.
I mean, I think Ilakkiya covered most of the points in terms of idea of being vulnerable, being seen as someone who's weak in public, because sometimes crying within four walls, it's fine because no one is going to bat an eye when you do it, in your dorm room or a place where it's just you. So, and we're never going to know. So, and there are times when college students, adults, and majority of them might be doing this, maybe at times when they're stressed. It's just that we don't see it or they don't talk about it. So, and that's again a part of not being seen. The idea of ties into the idea of toxic masculinity and femininity. So it is definitely related. The things that we hear from our parents, the things that we see from our peers when we grow up, those things shape our idea, our personal idea of what toxic masculinity is. So that could be different from what you view as toxic masculinity. So, and there are places where our boundaries might meet, and crying might fall in that boundary, where both of us say, you know what, crying, that's a no-no for men. But for some people, it's okay. For a community, that may be okay. But crying in public is a no-no. So there you go into more details as to what it means. But yeah, definitely it ties in.
That's a very good answer. Yeah. Ilakkiya?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Vyas's answer. I see how it ties into toxic masculinity more prevalently because that's a term I'm more familiar with. I have just learned about toxic femininity. So toxic masculinity is basically the idea like you got to be dominant, you have to be the man, which basically means you're always strong and you're never weak and you don't rely on anyone. I say this with a mocking tone. Anyways, so that's why toxic masculinity easily ties in with crying because the idea of it is that you shouldn't cry, right? You should never be weak. You should never show weakness. If anything goes bad, you just gotta get up, dust yourself off, and like move on. You don't get to stay in any negative emotions. You don't get to show any sad emotions. And as for toxic femininity, I think just like based on what I've learned so far, if they're in a situation that cries for caring, sympathy, or anything, they might feel obligated to cry. Maybe to be the one showing care in a situation, potentially. I'm guessing. Um, yeah, that's all I can think about that one right now.
I have nothing more to add with the toxic masculinity, but with toxic femininity, like one of the things I was hoping to get was if like women cry or like a female person cries, um, it's usually like is not it is like considered like a big thing, but sometimes they might be crying due to reasons like depression and things like that, and it would not be considered as a big thing because of toxic femininity, where yeah they're women, they cry, it is what it is, and that is the sort of thing where it's taken into an extreme on the other side. And I'm not saying whenever like someone cries you have to like take feel like bad about it, but I'm saying there are times where like maybe they're crying because like they have depression or something like that, and at that point they're usually not taken seriously that they actually have depression. They've probably just seen that yeah they're crying because they're sad, and sometimes that could be more than that. So we already spoke about like why comforting is very important. So so how do you comfort a person when they're crying? Like what are some things that you can do?
Active listening. I had to do a presentation about that recently. Uh, and although that was more in the context of just like bad news in general, it wasn't specific to crying. I think the elements overlap very much. Just sit there with them, get at eye level. If they're sitting down, sit down. If they're standing up, stand up. Um, maybe get them to a place where they feel like safe to cry. Because again, the point that Vyaas made of like if you're within four walls, no one cares. It's just that when you're in public and many people can see you, that you might feel it might be hard, right? So if you notice that someone's about to cry or they're crying, can you take them? Can you walk with them to some other place away from a group? Um, do that, then like listen to them why they're crying, like let them vent out their emotions. In my experience, usually after crying, I get more clarity, right? Or I'm more calm to think about the next thing. So just listen to someone throughout like the time that they're crying, like however bad it is. If they like physical touch and you know this, give them a hug. If you don't know, ask them, can I give you a hug? If that's something you like to do, to physically comfort the person, to show them that you're there. Um, Look at them, don't judge them, don't say anything like, but why is this making you cry? Or don't you think it could be this way? Like don't question their experience. Just let it be. Listen to it. Just nod along. And afterwards, uh, and they slowly stop crying, because everyone will eventually stop crying. You can say like, how are you feeling now? What do you want to do? It's okay that you cried. It's fine. I'm here for you. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good answer.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she brings up a very good point in terms of clarity after crying. So that may not be the case for every person who cries, but usually the from an evolutionary point of view, crying shows vulnerability. Number one. Number two, it releases feel-good hormones, where you feel better about yourself. So that may be your life may not drastically improve after crying, but at least gives you that comfort and that sort of short-term energy that you need to make long-term plans to solve that issue. So that's what crying does to you. And usually, from my experience, after crying, I after crying, the best part about crying is you get a really good night's sleep after crying. So no matter how hard your day is, and if you cry, you're gonna feel bad, and that's why you feel bad and you cry. But I've noticed that I have a really good night's sleep after crying, where and that might help your day. So those things can help. So yeah, in that sense, there are some benefits, definitely.
To further clarify what I said when I meant clarity, it's just like you're more calm then, instead of like bawling your eyes out, and you're just like, you're breathing quick and things like that. You're at least more calm after crying.
No, there's a tipping point. You can't cry for half an hour straight. Like there's a point where your tear glands run out of water. Your tear glands run out of tears. So there's just not enough tears after 15 minutes of crying. And each people have a threshold. So after 10 minutes of crying, they no matter how hard they try, they can't cry from the 11th minute onwards. So that's where your clarity thing comes in, and you feel better. So once you reach that point where you can't cry anymore, you know that you kind of feel better, like no matter how illusory that feeling is.
And you also bring up an important point that, or at least I realized when you were talking, the way we comfort other people who are crying is based on how we would want to be comforted when we're crying. It's very much like how can I relate my experience to someone else? And it's good to think about maybe their experience is not what you want, because I enjoy physical touch. So I like giving hugs, but my roommate freshman year, she does not like physical touch. So whenever she was going through something hard, I could not hug her, even though I would have liked to be hugged, or I would like to hug her. She doesn't want to be hugged, so I can't do that. So it's important to keep in mind what the other person wants. And as when we're on the topic of physiological things, the reason why your nose gets runny when you're crying is because your tears actually going through your nose. Like your runny nose is those are your tears coming out of your nose. That's what that is.
Yeah, people cry for a lot of reasons. Could be physical pain, it could be someone passing away because of grief, or it could be just like anxiety with all those things. So let's pick these three topics with grief, where like someone passed away. Second one is just physical pain, where they like, got hurt and then they're crying. And the third one is not because of some event that's happening, but rather something that could happen, and it's not something that they want to happen. So it could be something like maybe someone might pass away, or maybe I might lose this job, and basically, so like having a crime because of a fear that something is going to happen. So how would you comfort a person on these three situations, and how would you want to be comforted in these three situations?
Someone's crying from grief, hold their hand, be there silently. Don't tell them everything's gonna be okay. Just be there, because you will never understand how truly important that person was to the person you're comforting.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a really good Netflix show by Ricky Gervais. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. Ricky Gervais. So he has a really good show on Netflix about about death and him losing his wife to cancer, and how people are a bit more blunt in terms of how they express grief, or how they, even the term passing away. So he passed away, she passed away. So those are things to help us blunt the impact of the word death. So you could easily say he died, right? So my granddad died a few months back. So, but the usage of the word passed away is to reduce that impact. But in the UK, he brings up, a bit more, we see a bit more into how people view loss in his social circle, and how he makes jokes around death, and how the jokes are a bit more dark, but they still find the humor in such situations. So it's a really good show. I forget the name of the show, but you should be able to find it on Netflix. He has a couple of shows, and this one's on the loss of his wife to cancer. So yeah.
Both are very good answers. So it's just about like knowing the importance that like people grieve in different ways. With physical pain, it's going to go away unless it's like a broken bone or something. Then you have like take them to a hospital where crying is not the priority. As for anxiety, just tell them like comfort them by saying, hey, like it's like things will be all right, or saying things like no matter what happens, like I'll be there. Uh, like with you, we can go on this journey, or things like that. And if they actually need like help, where it's got to a point where you do know that they have anxiety, and then they have this, then maybe they should be talking to a therapist. So depending on what it is, like you can go to the right person. So sometimes people feel that it's genuinely their fault when someone else cries at their presence. Like someone you get to know about this from someone like from later. Basically, like your friend and like another person was there, and then like the other person basically cried, and then your friend felt guilty about it because your friend sort of like saw it as a bad thing that like they're crying in your presence. There's nobody else, so it's probably your fault. That's the sort of thing that your friend thought, and then you later get to know about it uh, like from your friend, and then so what do you do there?
Wait, let me get the scenario straight. Some person is crying, a friend of yours happens to be in the room, they think it's their fault, and then you hear about it from the friend later, and the friend is telling you, I think I did something, this person is crying. Or like, I didn't do something, this person's crying. So what would you say to that friend?
Yes, but it happens more regularly where no matter who cries, like if they're in the room, they sort of feel like they're probably responsible for why they're crying. They take that into their thing, and they like sort of worry about it, or feel bad about it, uh, and they genuinely think that it's their fault that they're crying. And I mean, for example, it could even be because of like their own like mental health reasons. But I'm asking, if that is the case that's happening to your friend, what would you do in that scenario?
I guess I would try to logically point out to the friend that like if this person is a stranger, there's absolutely not like very few things you could have done to make them upset, especially if you didn't talk to them or you didn't interact with them. Uh, like if your friend like didn't say anything but like was physically aggressive or said something or did something to the person and they're crying, well then yeah, it's your fault. But if you didn't speak to them, if you didn't interact with them, how can you? Well, I would try to figure out why they're trying to blame themselves. It could maybe they were raised in a household where they've always been made to feel bad things if they did things badly. I guess I'm trying to think about parentification. That's a different topic. It's basically like you're the parent for your parents because they're not emotionally there to support themselves, and so you become their emotional punching bag in a way. And in that kind of scenario, you always try to fix other people's sadness, right? You want to try and fix your parents' sadness. You want to try and fix something. So if you're raised in that kind of environment where you feel responsible for other people's happiness, then seeing a stranger crying might make you feel again like, what can I do to fix this? What can I do to help them? But I don't, again, it's hard for me to see it in terms of what have I done to make it bad for them, more of like this. Rather, I feel like most people will try to think, what can I do to help them? Because I know I've seen strangers crying, and I go up to them and say like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, what's happening?" And I do that. Um, but that's like in a helping mentality, not like a, "Oh my God, I messed up" mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think that either. I mean, it'd be very hard to find, I don't know. It'd be very hard to find someone who would blame themselves for seeing a stranger crying. If it's someone they know, if it's a friend, if it's someone else, then we're talking about something different. But if it's a stranger crying, I mean, you'd offer a glass of water, maybe offer them something to eat, to get their energy up, talk to them, listen to them. So, I mean, those are things that you could do. But yeah, yeah, blaming themselves you know, or thinking that they messed up in that situation. I don't know. Akshay, have you felt like that? I don't know. I haven't. It seems like Ilakkiya hasn't felt that emotion at that moment. What do you think, or what do you feel?
I have never felt that either, but I was like looking for anecdotal experiences for this discussion, and one of them was like reading about these things. And like that was like with a friend. So like this question, I was like sort of like a three-part thing where first we do it with a stranger, second we do it with a friend, and third we do it with like a parent who's crying, and we go like step by step, and then see like how we deal with it. So like that's why this one started off with the stranger, so that's why it feels like way less connected than what it will be. So like with the other questions, you guys will like get like more feel into it. So okay, so same question now. It's like two of your friends, and then friend again like two of your friends, and then like the friend tells you, so what do you do?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't. Wait, why is there three people? Why can't you just make it a situation where it's just you and the person who's crying? So having three people
Because you're
just
not the one who's because you're not the one who's comforting them, but rather you're comforting the person who is feeling guilty for not being able to comfort the other person well.
huh.
Because
It's a
even
very
people,
complex emotion. I don't even know if there's a word in English or any other language for that. I was
Called
just reading up.
compassion, Vyaas. It's called understanding and active listening.
No, but this is a very specific kind of compassion. I don't know that I have no experience with. I don't know. Yeah, it's your yeah. You take it. You take it away. Like yeah.
So the question is, this friend, this friend, your friend's friend was crying, and now you need to talk to this friend because they feel bad that their friend was crying.
yes,
They felt bad
if
that
I
their friend
like,
was crying. No, they felt bad that their friend was crying, but also the fact that they couldn't comfort them well enough. So that's where the guilt part comes in. Like they just didn't
Okay.
know how to handle the situation better, and he or she is recounting that situation to you, and what happens then?
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that detail. Would have forgotten it. I guess just try to speak to the friend, understand why they think friend number 3 was crying, and your friend number 1. This is friend number 2. Friend number 3 is the one who was upset. Try to figure out why friend number 3 was crying, and speak to them. Speak to if friend 2 knows, then speak to them rationally about like what things they could or could not have done in that situation to comfort that person, so it's okay that they weren't able to successfully do it. Like let's say the person is crying because like they didn't get a job, or like if someone passed away, right? Someone like a friend. You can comfort them in the moment, but you can't make their sadness go away. Like that's something they have to understand, empathize, and like they need to internalize and understand it. Friend number 3 needs to do that on their own, right? The most you can do there is sit there, hold their hand, say like, I hear you, I'm here for you. So in that kind of situation, if friend number 3's way of processing emotions is to cry, then there's nothing you could have done to stop it. Just being there was enough. You didn't walk away. You didn't walk out of the situation. You stayed there. That's good. If you feel like you want to talk to them more, go back and talk to them. Especially if you think it's one of these more chronic things where it's like it's going to take a while. Speak to them again, see how they're doing afterwards. But if it's something like short term that friend 2 did that hurt friend 3, and friend 2's aware that they did this to hurt friend 3, then I guess it's the fact that they're feeling guilty already means that they know they didn't do well enough. So then I would just like say, hey, it's okay. This happens. You got to learn at some point, and then like speak about what you could do instead to help them in that scenario. So the next time something like that comes up, friend 2 is more equipped to handle it. Wouldn't blame friend 2 for any of it.
Okay, let's say it's the same scenario, but now same three people, you, the one who's comforting and the one who's crying. Let's say the one who's crying is is the parent of the one who's comforting, and you get to know the situation. What do you do?
I don't think I would do much different from the previous question. Just talk to the person, try to understand, was it your fault? Did you make your mom or dad cry? Or were they crying because of something else and you were just there to see it? And then based on that, kind of give them a sense of, hey, you did fine. I mean, regardless, I would say you did fine. Here's what you can do next time, or you did fine. Keep it up for the next time. And it might be harder or easier to follow up because with a friend, you're more like equal playing field. And your parents, depending on what notions they have of parenthood, they might not like being spoken to about them crying from their kids. They have a notion that like we're superior or we're better. We don't have to listen to you. You're just too young. All those things could backfire in terms of like you trying to speak to them again and then saying, no, stop. Like, don't talk. Like, I never cried or whatever. And they wouldn't want to take emotional advice from someone younger than them. So that could backfire. But depending on your relationship with your parents, they might appreciate you reaching out to them afterwards and talking about it.
That is a pretty good answer. Vyaas, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, that pretty much sums up, how one would go about talking to your friends, because it's that's something that might happen in families. It's not that rare for a parent to cry in front of their kids. So it's something usually kids go through. At least one of their parents, being upfront or being, they have nothing to hide in front of their kids. So that shows a level of trust, and that can help the kid in terms of developing. But there's again the flip side of how much you cry in front of your kids, and you don't want to dump your emotional needs, and you don't want the kids to be a punching bag. So there's a fine line, the way I look at it. So yeah.
Yeah, both are very good answers. Where like one you took from why it's hard for the parent to cry, and one from like why it's hard for the child to see a parent cry, and both are very very important perspectives. I actually asked this question because it's usually with crying, like it's seen as like the crying and then the comforter, and then that's all there is to it. But then sometimes, like after doing the role of comforter, they feel really bad as well. It's emotionally exhausting as well. So, it is really important that there's someone else who makes sure that this person is doing well. So that was the relevance of this question. Anyway, so we're in the last question. This is another situation. So let's say you and your friend are sad for the same reason, and nobody else is there. It's just like the two of you. So your friend starts crying, and you are not ready to have a conversation yet, because both of you are sad for the same reason. You are not ready to have a conversation yet, but the other person is crying. So what do you do here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I mean, you can listen. That's the first thing you can do. I don't know if active listening is something that you can do, because you're in that same emotional state almost. And when it comes to active listening, maybe you're in a place where you can listen without with without clouded thinking. So that might be hard to do when you're in that same emotional state. So yeah, I mean, and if you're friends, like you, one wouldn't. I wouldn't. If I were in that situation, I wouldn't try to get out of that room. So even if I'm not ready to talk about it, I'd still just be there and talk stuff, because that's what moves humanity forward. Like it's just people being in misery and them trying to figure stuff out, no matter how bleak that idea of hope is. So people who are going through the toughest times, they share their deepest, darkest, they've been in those deepest, darkest situations, or shared those memories. And even if one of them is not ready to talk about it, they're still able to find some solace by saying that out, just by saying it out loud. So you don't even have to actively listen. Like, you could just be thinking about what you're going to have for breakfast next morning. But in some cases, just them saying it out loud and not to a wall can help. So yeah, you don't even have to be actively listening in some cases, but it's highly encouraged.
I agree with Vyaas, not much more to add. And maybe it'll start helping you too. Like in your attempt to respond and listen to your friend, that you'll start verbalizing things as well.
I actually slightly disagree with both of you, because the way I see it, just because another person is crying doesn't mean this person is not feeling just as bad, or maybe even worse. So having the person to like have the conversation when they're not ready could basically be like bullying themselves, depending on their state. Like if they are ready, like okay to at least be able to like not have an active conversation, like not have like that, like be actively listening, but even like a passive, like if you're able to do that, like do what Vyas said, because that is the best case scenario there. But if that is not possible, that is something that can happen too. Where I would just say, like, be in the same room, have like the moral support, where like both of you are going through the same thing. But at that time, I understand that they're crying, but like when you're not in a position, don't bully yourself because you're not able to be the comforter, because you are going through the same thing as well. And so maybe you might, like, you are in a position where you shouldn't expect yourself to suddenly pep yourself up to be the comforter, because maybe like you're not ready there yet, because you are feeling just as bad. And like, so don't have those expectations for yourself that because the other person's crying and because the other person like openly showing their vulnerability, where they about them feeling bad, you have to rise up to the occasion. So that's my answer to it. Do you guys have any closing thoughts?
Wait, I have a follow-up. So you're saying you would leave the room? Is that your answer to that question?
No, stay in the room,
Yeah.
but like not have a conversation, because you're still like going through this thing where
So if it's you and
like
me,
you're
Akshay, in
giving
that
them
room.
support. Okay.
Wait, so if it's you and me, Akshay, in the room, and I'm sharing stuff, and you're not in a place where you want to talk or listen, so what would that conversation look like? What would you say to me? You wouldn't leave the room, right?
It's a sort of thing where I would say I would still be in the room, because I do want to support you, but at the same time I need just as much as support as well. So I might be staying in the room because I want your support. And like by like you openly sharing it, maybe I might not be ready to like hear everything. So I might just be like in like a sort of shock that I might not even hear what you're saying, because depending on like what the thing is, what the news, like why you're sad, or like I might just like like not really like be even like passively nod, because I have to like go through my own emotions with this thing, where I have to do my own thing. And depending on like how they want to deal it, let's say like the two of us are in the room, right, and you're the one who's crying, and like I'm the one who's like not able to cry. Then first I have to like deal with my emotions, And at that time, if I'm not able to be there, maybe you could be the person who's like, like, I see that you're not in a position to like be able to comfort me, and I do need comfort though, because I know who I am. I need a comfort in this. I need a person to comfort me in this situation. So maybe you go and like go on a phone and talk to someone else. Anything could happen. What I'm saying is the importance that just because like I'm not crying and you are, I could be feeling just as bad because just because you're openly sharing your feelings by crying, like I shouldn't be given the obligation that I have to be the comforter. Yes, okay.
I guess a simple thing for that very scenario, if you just illustrated Vyaas, actually I could just say, hey, I'm not ready to talk right now, still processing. So I'll stay here, but I
I
can't
mean,
listen to you right now.
that's pretty much what I was going for. I thought you would say that and end the question. So, but yeah, so a statement like that, a definitive statement like what Ilakkiya said, and framing it in the right way is what is needed if you're not willing to talk.
Just more on like the different aspects of crying in general. When you see other people cry, you cry. That's mirror neurons, right? Like that's you empathizing to other people. That's why you try to cry or you tend to cry when you're watching like really emotional movies, or the main character is dying or the friend is dying, like a lot of Disney movies. So that's part of the thing. And I think it's important to also talk about crying from happiness or just like strong emotions as well, because you don't only cry when you're upset. I remember uh, I was so I played badminton in high school, and the number one player on our team, she just like went through a really hard match and she like won at the very last minute, right? And then afterwards, there was this tiny baby who was also there, like some player's sibling, I assume. And the number one player, she went to go give like a high five to the kid, and the kid just like walked away. And I found that hilarious. But I was also very invested in the game, so I was like, I started crying because I thought that was hilarious, and I was like very amped up on emotions. So I remember that as a time like I'm not upset, I'm maybe happy, and I was still crying then. So it's important to know that people can cry of happiness, and it's like when people win a match, they cry sometimes too, and that's like out of sheer happiness and like the exertion they've given. And I guess I just want to bring that up because we shouldn't forget that crying is not just a bad thing. It's a way of expressing intense emotion, positive or negative.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Vyas?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've sometimes tried looking at nature. So that's something that's happened to me when I on some days it just feels like I see a really great sunrise or a lush green field. So and that's usually happens alone. So when I'm out in the nature, just me by myself, and that's again expression of intense joy, or this feeling that you're connected with something else. So and so yeah, it's definitely something that's helped humans survive difficulties and express happiness and disappointment. So yeah, closing thought would be it shouldn't be it shouldn't be stigmatized in terms of don't do this, don't do that, don't cry in front of public, don't cry in front of this person, don't cry in front of that person, because you can't control your emotions, and you need to be really wise sage if you're a master of emotions and you maintain that state of equanimity 100% at all times. So yeah, no one's like that. So yeah, so don't push yourself too much if you cry, or don't think about it too hard where you regret crying in public. That's another. You cry because you cried in public like last week, so that happens too, and that's another thing where you don't want that to happen. So, yeah, you don't want to be anxious about being anxious, you don't want to be worried about being worried last week. So yeah, try to cut that down as well, because that's not good. If you're crying because you cried last week, you crying last week for xyz reason is good, But you crying just because you cried in public, that's something that you can work with. That's very different from crying about intense joy or emotion. So just that, yeah.
My closing thoughts are very simple. If someone wants to cry, let them cry. Don't say no. It's sort of what like two of you have said as well. And the other thing is, like comforter is also like a hard job. So if you feel bad about it after like being the comforter, it's a very normal thing. Uh, so, but at the same time, like don't say I don't want to be the comforter, so don't cry, because that kind of defeats the purpose. So that's all I have to add. Thanks so much for joining this discussion. I had a wonderful time.
Thanks for watching. For more discussions, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Also, make sure to like and comment more topics that you'd like to see us discuss. We'll see you next time.